You're listening to a podcast of spurious morality.
Hello, and welcome to a podcast of spurious morality. I'm Connor, and I'm joined by Mark.
Hello.
And Greg. Hello.
Hello.
And we're doing something a little bit different this week. This is a first for us, where we're going to have a little bit of a visual element in this week's episode, because we're going to do a commentary. I've never ever done a commentary track before. This is going to be a bit novel. How are you feeling about it?
This is also my first time, so I'm excited.
Yeah, I've listened to many as a commentary, but doing one is an entirely different kettle of fish. So if I don't know whether I'll be good, bad, or indifferent at this, but we'll give it a go. I know you guys will have lots of interesting things to say, so
we'll see how it goes. The only one I've ever heard before is Russell T Davies and Katie Manning on Death of the Doctor from the Sarah Jane Adventures. So that's
You're setting a low bar for yourself. My goodness, those two are fantastic. Wow.
So it's all going to be very new. I'd be interested just to know before we start, how did you guys first hear? I assume you both watched Doctor Who before the new series started. How did you hear that it was coming back, and that how did you feel about watching the first new episode?
Do you want to go first on that, Craig? Or
yeah, when I was in college when Doctor Who came back, and I'd been watching it on American Public TV, the classic series, since I was 4 or 5 years old. So I was already just a obsessive fan of the program, and there'd always been rumors of the show coming back and so forth. And then there was, obviously the TV movie, and then there was, Scream of the Schalke. But I just remember going on to the old Doctor Who news page and one random day, and all of a sudden just huge headline like Russell T Davies to bring back Doctor Who. And I was like, this cannot be real. And that was like a year in advance. And so that was, a lot was going on in my life, but still, man, like the anticipation of waiting for Doctor Who to come back. And then, of course, it didn't air as live in the US back then. So I had to acquire this episode at the time through alternate means. And it was just a mind-blowing experience to finally get to sit down and watch new modern Doctor Who.
And Mark, what was your experience of it at the time?
yeah, I like Greg. I was a long time fan. So my earliest memories. I'm 45, about nearly 46, and so my earliest memories go back to the very late Tom Baker era. So that's kind of my kind of vintage, and my fandom really started when Doctor Who just suddenly didn't come back one year, and I had to go on a fact finding mission, and from there, that sort of solidified the whole card carrying obsessive fan kind of experience. And so I'd gone through what many call the wilderness years, what Paul Cornell calls the theme park years, with the new adventures and all of that. And I'd come to a place of just accepting, Big Finish and the books and whatnot are Doctor Who now, and we're a very small club that still carries the torch, but we're getting really good quality stuff here, and it might as well be that as anything else. And then suddenly out of the blue, I woke up one morning. It was my habit at the time to listen to Radio 5 Live in the mornings because I thought, I would ingest a bit of news first thing. And so I put the earphones in, and I could hear a DJ, well, a presenter over here called Nikki Campbell, just talking about how Doctor Who was coming back, and I was going, "What? I must be still asleep or something." And um, then he was saying it's going to be made by BBC Wales and this and that. There was actual solid facts coming into the story, and I thought, wait, no, I am actually awake. This is bizarre. This is like, and like from there, I was just bolt awake. Just thinking this is insane. Like the impossible miracle has happened. And then Russell T Davies's name was mentioned very quickly into that, and his whole TV pedigree was mentioned, and all of that. So there was a lot of very early, even right then, that first morning, very positive talk about how the show was going to be and how it was going to feel different and so on. And it was all very encouraging sounding. And I remember going down to work in a daze and sitting at my desk and then turning on and double checking that it was actually a news story on the BBC website. So from there, obviously the excitement built and built, and tidbits of information. But I remember that first stop press in Doctor Who magazine. I remember Russell T Davies joking, I think, in that first news story that he was going to bring back the Garm and things like that. And then gradually things began to fall into place, like Christopher Eccleston's casting and the first mention of Rose and things like that, just creeping into the pages of Doctor Who magazine over months and months. And then I can remember very clearly just that night of broadcast, a few minutes before the show actually started, because it was obviously doing that sort of countdown, pacing up and down, waiting for the show to start. And that Graham Norton thing, the live show that ended up interrupting the broadcast, as is now famous, was on, in the background, and I just had it on mute, and I decided it's a strange little thing, but I just had this thought in my head of, I don't want to forget about Big Finish in all of this, so I'm just going to give, while I'm killing time here, I'm just going to give the natural history of fear, which had just been released, a little tiny listen. And it was the pre-title sequence. So I just listened to that, and the very last words in that pre-title sequence are Paul McGann saying, "It's time." And I just thought, I just stopped it there, and I thought, yeah, that's perfect, and it is time. And then I turned on the TV, and Doctor Who, Doctor Who started, and we were away, and it was, wow. I was just it's just an amazing time. I still can't believe sometimes. I still, even now, nearly 20 years on, get hit by this feeling of like, I can't believe this is real. It's that we've had all this.
Well, I the first I heard about it was about 2 hours before it started, and I'd never ever heard of Doctor Who before.
Wow.
And that was one of my uncles who watched it back, when the classic series was on, just happened to mention, "Oh, it's back tonight. We should all watch it." And I questioned him over the, I don't know, for whatever reason, I was hooked on hearing it. I was really interested in hearing about it, and he told me all about the Daleks and etc. and about all the different Doctors. And I then was really disappointed when the Daleks weren't in Rose, because I expected them to be in the first episode. But I think we'll maybe just get started and press play and see where we end up then. So we'll do a bit of a countdown here. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And we all hit go. We all hit play on the word go then. So as long as everyone's sitting comfortably, we'll begin. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
And we're away.
I guess the first thing that immediately jumps to mind for me is like how like pleasantly surprised I was that they had kept the same general idea of the title sequence and the theme music and everything else.
Yeah, love that, and yeah, just straight into that vortex feeling. But those big giant like Hollywood letters were felt very new. That sort of you know bombastic sort of introduction of like the names in big block letters zooming out like the Superman theme or something, or the Superman title sequence. It was kind of like that at the same time.
I love this whole shot of the Earth thing. Like I read somewhere that every season, possibly between 25 and this, starts with a shot of the Earth. And I'm not sure, I can't remember how season 26 starts, but I love that it held true right up until, I don't know if it was series 5 or 6 or 7. but
Oh
every
wow,
series between 25 and then like 5 or 6 of the new series starts with a shot of the Earth.
that's really cool. I think season 26 starts with the Brigadier in a garden center, but I could be wrong. But it does very shortly afterwards have a clip of the Earth with a really cheap effect. But
I'm not sure if
it's so close to being true that little run, uninterrupted run.
I'm not sure if we've missed it there, but in that opening sequence, or possibly a wee bit later here, we might be able to see it. The number 23 to put Newcomen is here. It's Iris Wildtime's bus.
Oh, you're joking me? That's brilliant. Also, there's a cool bit here where the music, this really sort of peppy music that Murray Gold is introducing things with quite bravely. It actually just turns diegetic for a little second. While you're in the store there, it actually becomes the clothes shop's own music, and I just thought it was a really nice touch.
What I love about this is how defiantly different it is. I mean, it's not only like the fast pace, the music, but it's also like the really like bright colors, the saturations turned up. Like it it feels in these first few minutes, nothing like classic Doctor Who. And there was always a question, well, what is RTD going to do? I mean, is this just going to pick up where the classic series left off? Is this going to be its own thing? And no, it's pretty. I mean, it's obviously got one foot in Doctor Who, of course, but it's pretty defiantly its own thing.
Yeah, it glows, doesn't it? That I remember Russell T Davis talking about how he wanted it that if people were channel hopping, they would get this sort of warmth coming from it. That something would just sort of come off the screen at them that would make them just stop even 2 seconds in and sort of watch this thing because they like the tone, the color, as you were talking about that sense of. I mean, it's an odd thing to look back on it now. It looks so kind of dated, that filmized video look, but I do really like it. I'm very nostalgic for it as I'm watching it here.
I love the lighting here.
Yeah.
It is really, really creepy. Like, and we're coming up on you know the reveal of the Autons, and it's played very subtly. Like, it's not played. I suppose for people who have seen the classic series, like obviously anyone who has seen Spearhead and Terror sees someone in Doctor Who walk into a room full of shop window dummies and knows what's happening straight away. But this all feels very much like it's played for new viewers. Like we're about to discover this. Like they're not drawing attention to the dummies here, and it just is going to happen very naturally that one of them moves or turns its head or something like that.
Yeah,
Um,
Yeah.
and I like that it's bringing in, it's focused on bringing, it's focused on new viewers right from the beginning.
And talking of terror, this is the moment where Graham Norton's live feed cuts in for about a minute, and everybody just collectively holds their breath and goes, "Please don't let this be ruined." People, please don't have the people turning over because of this nonsense, But I guess we've survived that one.
Did they announce in advance that the Autons were coming back, like, or was this left until broadcast?
Oh, that I can't actually
yeah,
remember.
I don't
I think
remember.
they said. Sorry, Greg.
I'm just saying I don't remember. I mean, I know like they would often, tell you one thing was coming back to conceal that something even bigger was coming back. But at this point in the show, I'm not sure.
Hmm. I think so much had been seen of behind the scenes for this one.
True.
The public filming that one was out of the bag, not necessarily officially, but certainly amongst fans.
Unlike in Spearhead or Terror here, you get a lot of close-ups on the mannequins and they're like blank expressionless, rubber faces, and it's really creepy. It works really
Mm.
well.
I was just gonna say it's really strange seeing the 2005 fashions again. Like you wouldn't see anyone dead in that shirt now. That lead Auton with a sort of stripy purple one.
That's true.
I love that actually. That the Autons are full on running there. Like they're properly sprinting after them, because like a lot of times in classic Who they sort of slowly shamble after you, and that
Mm.
one there they're genuinely chasing them.
Like modern zombies.
28 mannequins later.
Yeah. I love all this stuff in the lift about the students, and he's going, yeah, well done, that makes sense. He's so himself so quickly. The Ninth Doctor, he's like no other Doctor you've ever encountered. Just everything's really to the point and blunt, and um,
They
yeah.
never do that wee visual effect with the sonic screwdriver again. Actually, that's the only time that they have sort of have the actual, like, you see a sonic wave come out of it, and it's sort of like a blue projection from the bulb. You never ever see that again. It's just the practical light.
Yeah, a bit of money saving later on. They learned where to splash the cash and where not.
Also, and I say this with love, if they put that effect every time the sonic screwdriver was used, they would have bankrupted the BBC.
Are you saying the Sonic's been slightly overused? I'm shocked at this
No,
news.
absolutely not. Why would you suggest such a thing?
Oh, here we go. It's the so I'm a bit early there. Actually, I thought the first reveal of the TARDIS is coming up very shortly, isn't it? I haven't seen Rose in a long time.
That is a perfect intro for his doctor. Like it just works so well.
Yeah, amazing.
I remember watching this and thinking, what the heck is this? Like, this is so much different from what I remember. But as soon as Eccleston was on screen, it's like, oh, that's the doctor. Like
Yeah,
I bought it instantly. Like, not a doubt in my mind.
yeah, same. Oh, there she is.
I love the
Although,
wee musical, like you hear a wee bit of the theme there as well.
yeah, and if you had any doubts that this was nearly 20 years ago, look at that TV. Look at the fact that they've got blank VHS cassettes on the shelves. Just yeah, it's just a little time capsule of 2005, and the fashions, as you say. Jackie's straight on the phone there to try and get an exclusive to the newspapers.
So the phone down straight away. I always thought that was really funny.
Yeah, Billy Piper was just straight off the bat, because there was a lot of raised eyebrows about Billy's casting, wasn't there, at the time? I do remember that amongst fans, and then everybody sort of had to kind of, not everybody, but those who were skeptical kind of had to eat their words very quickly, because they were like, "Oh yeah, I know she's brilliant."
I
Um,
had no idea who she was, so
that helps.
it was fine to. I mean, I saw a lot of fans complaining, but I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah. I
I'll
guess we had
take
the
it
same
as it
thing later
comes.
on with Catherine Tate as well, because there was the whole when it was. I found her a bit OTT in the Christmas invasion, and when it was revealed that she was coming back in for a full series, even I think was a bit like, oh, I don't know about this, and then she turned out to be brilliant. Um, so I guess what we've learned is that Russell T Davies really knows what he's doing.
You
in,
get that wee
in many respects.
I was just going to say, you get that wee bit there where it's the BBC News feed and it has the BBC brand and all. I always loved, and it always seemed to happen more in Russell's era, where it's, you get the things like the BBC News intro, and sometimes you get BBC News hosts playing themselves on the broadcasts. And I always thought that felt really, that felt like it grounded the thing, sort of like a tie into the real world.
Yes. I think Andrew Marr turns up in this one, doesn't he? Back in his roving correspondent days. Um, yeah.
He's in it's the Slade, it's the one with the Slade. I think he's definitely in it.
Oh, I could be mixing the two up. Sorry. He is
But
in that one. Sorry, you're right. You're right. It's because it's that first recording block with Keith. Is it? Do you say Boak or Keith Boak or Keith Boak? That was the director anyway. So yeah, some of that's sort of enmeshed in my head because it was because I haven't watched it in such a long time, but partly just because it was all filmed quite close together. Oh, I love this bit. The head through the calf flap. It's so the broad comedy in this is so it's cartoonish at times. Russell T Davies loves just he paints in quite broad brushstrokes sometimes on these.
But I think it's effective. I mean, it really defines his characters so easily. Like, that's one of his great strengths as a writer, is that you
Yeah,
could spend 2 minutes in a room with a character and you know exactly what they're like.
yeah, it's extraordinary.
and the meme was born.
Yeah. I love all the little touches of this flat too. Like there's different little paint samples just stuck onto the wall there, but nobody's ever done anything about the actual renovation job. No, this is great here. He flicks through the book. He has that read in less time than it takes to read out the words Rose Tyler from the front of that letter.
Oh, there's the moment Big Finish have to ignore to make every single Eccleston audio work.
Yeah, but I think it did hear Russell himself say he never really intended that to be like I've just regenerated. He was just kind of checking out his reflection, which he hadn't seen in a long time or something, or
There's so much happening in this scene actually, and it's just occurred to me while we're watching it here. Like he's going through, he's having a conversation with Rose. He's learning about everything that's he's sort of like learning about the world around him here. But we're learning about him as well. The whole thing about the ears and the face. I do take it to mean that he's just been recently regenerated. But it feels much more faster paced than the classic series, and it feels like that's the first sort of concession to being 45-minute episodes rather than 4-part serials.
Yeah. I was just reminded recently that Chris Eccleston actually did this in his audition piece. He sat there and wrestled with a plastic hand in in the wherever it was, some hotel room somewhere, where they tried out different. I think I don't know how many actors they actually did audition, or if it was just him, but he had to audition anyway, kind of thing. But he was talking about that at a convention or something recently. That in itself is extraordinary that he's doing conventions. We never thought we'd see the day. That or Big Finish, I guess. But this is where I really like this scene, but you can sort of see Chris being a little uncomfortable or a little not quite. He's quite broad with the comedy facial expressions right here. He's almost like Wallace and Gromit, kind of, rubbery faced in it. And I think he tones that down a little as he goes on. But right here, you can sort of sense that he's just a wee bit, I don't know, slight out of his comfort zone doing the broad comedy. But when he switches in a minute, when he walks away from her after the turn of the earth speech, the change in his face is just brilliant. I love it.
I think he does a really good job too. Like, and this might just be coincidence because this, like you said, he was just figuring out how to play the character. But like some of the broad comedy almost feels a little bit forced, and like the smile's just a little bit too big, the expressions are a little bit too rehearsed, and is this like his trauma, showing through? I don't know if that was a conscious acting decision, but you can certainly read it that way if you want to.
Yeah, I like to read it that way, that he's masking. Yeah, really. He's masking even to himself. Just how okay he is, just breezing through the world, keeping everybody at arm's length.
I did always think, just as far as him sort of not feeling feeling a wee bit out of place with the broad comedy stuff. I always thought the first half of series 1 definitely you still feel like they're finding their feet a wee bit, but the second half of series 1, I don't think they put a foot wrong. And it does, split fairly, cleanly down the middle for me from Dalek onwards. I don't think they put a foot wrong in that sort of sense.
By Empty Child, they've really nailed the comedy.
Yeah. And I think he's with directors that he's more at home with, like Joe Ahern and Eros Lynn. Those guys seem to sort of settle him a bit. I don't know. He just maybe it's a bit unfair on Keith Bowick because he was first up, to suggest that he was less comfortable with that guy, But yeah.
The thing about this scene is, like, in nearly every shot, you can see the TARDIS just over the Doctor's shoulder. And, like, for me, watching this first time, I had no idea, what the significance of this blue box was.
Wow.
But for, for classic fans, like you get the wee shot of it as Rose leaves the shop as it explodes, and then you see it here where it's very, very prominent in the background, but they're not drawing any special attention to it until the Doctor walks to it.
Yeah.
Um,
And to her, it's an everyday object. It's just,
yeah,
well,
it's
until in a few seconds' time, I guess. But
that's the thing. The Doctor is the focus of all these shops, of
yeah,
all these shots, but it's still there in the background, and it's only, you know, it only gains its significance once he interacts with it. Then,
yeah, it looks massive there though. Like compared, the first time I saw that compared to like the original run, I thought that box is huge. Yeah, which it is. Comparatively, I know we've had that consciously drawn attention to in the series itself now. The inner dimensions leaking to the out as the box gets older and stuff like that. But Eccleston looked just tiny there in front of that box, and I don't think he's a particularly small guy. He's just. But yeah, I guess the way they shot that later, it didn't look like such a massive. It does look awesome though. I much prefer the look of the box in the classic series, but there's still something really appealing about just the way it looks, the way that the way it's been, even the shade of blue or something that's chosen for it there, it looks kind of, I don't know, it's kind of subtly present in the background. It doesn't look like the MFI cabinet that the first Matt Smith box looked like. Oh, here we go with you're never allowed to have Google on the BBC, so we've got Searchwise, which of course everybody uses. I think to this day they're still doing that. I don't think you ever see a BBC program where they use Google. They might use the verb. I don't know, but
I feel like if this was being made now, there'd be like shots of every classic Doctor in.
Oh yeah,
on that page.
100%.
I did love the fact though that he said, that it seems to be a title passed down, so they're already subtly shading in just very very gently the fact that this is the same continuity. Um,
When do
When you
we
read,
get like the first shots of old Doctors? Is it the next Doctor?
it's. I was about to say it is. Yeah, when with the info stamps, with the
Right.
Cybermen.
does human nature count because of the little sketches in the?
I always forget about it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Even Paul McGann's in there, isn't he? Just well, what might be Paul McGann? It's very scribbly, but
I like the concept of these, the photos showing him in the past here. They're not very good photoshops.
yeah. I'm so glad he never actually wore that polo neck for real. It's not a
I
big
like the polar neck. I really like the
do?
polar neck look.
Oh, okay.
Purely because it's a bit of variation from like out of all the Doctors, he's the one that has the least variation in his costume, I think.
Hmm.
Um, and I quite like that you can just have, like, I do imagine him in the Big Finish audio sometimes with the polo neck, just that it's a bit of a change.
Yeah, they do have him on the cover wearing that, but I chose to ignore that. It's not a primary source for me, the cover. So I just went, no, he's not wearing that unless they say so explicitly.
When you read the target novel of this scene, there is they do sort of Rose does flick through a binders, and it is all descriptions of the classic Doctors and the future ones as well. Like it goes up through the 10th through 13th Doctors, and then beyond into some ones that sort of were speculative at the time. But I always find it really funny that Rose saw the 5th Doctor and ended up fancying him. That's a wee detail in the target novel.
That's good. I haven't read that, but was one of the future incarnations like future beyond even what we've seen? Like they mentioned, was there a wheelchair user doctor or something?
There was a there was a there was and there was a woman with a flaming sword. I think was meant to be like the 14th Doctor. And the description sort of matches Tania Miller.
Right.
And I took that to mean like whenever Russell came back, I was like, well, obviously we know who he's going to cast now.
Yeah. The lighting in that shed is brilliant too, isn't it? The way that they've got the little holes in the side, and it's all blue on one side, and then kind of warm, just one little warm bulb hanging there. Yeah, and that, for something that's been shown to kids on a Saturday night, his one companion is death. That's good. Like, just throw that in early. It's- just make sure that they know they're not watching something that's completely safe. Now you didn't get a Dalek, Connor, but you did get this.
Oh dear Lord. Do you know, I was speaking to some friends recently about Doctor Who, and like they've always, sort of taken the Mickey out of it a wee bit, but a pun unintended. But there was someone asked me recently, "Oh, where should you start? Which episode should should I start with for Doctor Who?" And I was like, "Oh, go back and watch Rose. It's great, no problem."
Hmm.
About an hour later, I got a screenshot of Mickey and the bin, and that was it. They haven't watched Doctor Who since then.
Oh yeah, I've had that experience. I introduced a friend to Doctor Who via a VHS of Paradise Towers, which is the one I happen to have with me in school. He said, "Do you know what? I'll give this Doctor Who thing a go." And instead of just going, by the way, I quite like Paradise Towers, but it wasn't the one to introduce somebody to the show with. Let's put it that way.
Are you
But in
saying
my
Red
enthusiasm, I
Kangs were
handed it
not
over,
best?
and he's never watched it again. He still hasn't forgiven me. I keep meaning to tell him Bonnie Langford's back. Um, see what he makes of that.
It was good to realize that, we're still going to have some terrible effects in Doctor Who, like
Oh yeah, that's dreadful, isn't it?
I think I'm just looking here. I'm trying to see. I'm watching this on my phone. Sinful business, I know, but I don't think the rubber strands even track properly to his fingers here. So it doesn't. I think it
Yeah.
doesn't match up that way.
they do not. No,
I love Mickey's car though. I'm just gonna sit and watch that instead and admire the car.
Oh man, always forget about the burp.
but yeah, if I'm ever recommending people start this, I always say watch the first two because
Mm, yeah.
Yeah,
as much
yeah.
as I like this episode, there are moments like all of that and like Mickey here in the tractor in the car taxi, and
Plastic Mickey.
yeah, not good. Like it's
That's
not
shocking,
good.
isn't it? Wow. And the car driving all over the street. Like Rose is having a particularly dim moment here, but I guess it just has to work for the purposes of the plot.
I would like to think that it's a subtle commentary on Mickey's unavailability in their relationship, but no, it's not, unfortunately.
Yeah, authorial intent is one thing, and what we can make of it is another.
Russell T Davies has this real gift for hinting at things, and like it sort of comes in. It's most he has talked about having, um, like the crystalline falls of the Fifth Confederacy, and throwing these names out there and letting fans imagine what they look like because we can imagine it much better than they could ever realize on screen. But there's a wee moment in there as well where she's like, she says something like, "That was all Jimmy Stone's fault," and we know where he ended up. And I was like, I like that we're sort of getting hints that they're not feeling the need to explain all of this. Like it does feel quite natural that someone just makes an aside. The characters on screen know what it means, and we're just left to imagine.
Hmm.
Like that feels, there's no need to explain everything at length.
Yeah, yeah, I love that stuff. Such economy in his world building. It's ingests the cork. Brilliant. And this way, in a moment of introducing the TARDIS, is just superb because she actually puts herself back in danger in her astonishment at this thing. Um, it's like she's so freaked out by it that she will step back into imminent threat just to try and take on board what's happening.
Had to be so much fun to smash up the restaurant in the block hands suit.
Yeah.
I love the way this is all arranged, that the TARDIS isn't pushed up against a wall, that they do leave space for Rose to walk around, and they do demonstrate the bigger on the inside effect before they do the console room reveal.
Hmm. Little touch of IM Foreman and the gates there as well. I never really thought about that until just now. You know, that they're in a little, almost like junkyardy type space.
Mm,
Hmm.
I know
that's
that's a bit of
actually,
a
yeah, you're
stretch.
right, that never ever occurred to me. There's a great musical bit coming up as well here, because the first time that they, well, I suppose it's going to be the second, so here we're getting the running around bit I mentioned earlier. But when Rose comes in, then in just a wee second, you'll hear a wee bit of the Doomsday theme, and I love that her first step aboard the TARDIS has that little hint towards the end of her adventures.
Oh wow, like bookends. Yeah, that's really cool.
I love the faith that the doctor's putting in her here too. He's just inside, like she'll figure it out.
Yeah.
It's an incredible control room as well, like
Hmm.
visually very, very different from um, the classic series sets, and even from the TV movie one. But you're getting the film familiar elements there with the roundels, but they've been changed. They're not exactly as they were. They're it's a different take on them as such. You've got the TV movie console sort of time rotor, floor to ceiling, which is pretty cool. But I just love, like, this TARDIS does feel like its own little world. It does feel very self-contained and safe. Um, I still struggle to think of a new series set that has beaten this design.
I much prefer the I guess what I think of as the Capaldi or late Smith set. Um, but that, I guess that's the part of me that connects back most strongly to the TARDIS consoles of the 20th century, you know. But I do love this. There's, I think I remember this being described as being a sort of, was it Russell T Davies' own production note columns or something before we'd seen it on screen? He described it as like a womb-like space or something like that. I think it's
I,
got
I
that vibe.
I do think it was better lit in series 1 and 2 than it was. I don't like it when it's under the brighter lighting in
Hmm.
series 3 and 4. I think that sort of warm, watery light from the console and the underfloor, um, lighting works a lot better than the harsher overhead lighting that they use in series 3 and 4. It does make it feel a wee bit more organic, a little bit more alive, and a bit more sort of enclosed and do you know what I'm getting at?
Hmm.
Yeah, no, I
What?
do. I
Yeah.
do,
What?
absolutely.
What I like about it is it's almost got this like feeling of fallen empire to it. Like it's this grand space, but because the doctors had to change so many things about it to get it to work, it has this. At the same time that it feels warm and massive, it also feels a little run down. And I mean, that's both talking to the doctor's character, and I think it's also a subtle thing to talk about his past too.
Yeah, maybe
Um,
the Time War as well.
that was
Right.
the thing. I got when in 2010 they released a TARDIS handbook, which was like a history, and it's partly in universe history and partly set design history. It's really interesting, actually. I thought it was at the time, and the intention behind the set was something organic that has been remade and bits have been bolted and grafted on for use in war. And that's
Hmm.
that's why that was the sort of design policy, or the design theory behind the set.
See, that makes sense, right? But I must say I pretty much dislike the first Matt Smith set, and the reason is it has all those sort of grafted on elements, but the TARDIS has done that itself. It's kind of just gone, oh, this is the sort of thing you like now, just random whimsy, hot and cold taps and stuff. It doesn't necessarily have to be done like that, but it's the TARDIS just conjuring up this thing. Whereas here, like you can imagine, yes, a guy that's been through the Time War and just bolting stuff together, like just to bodge stuff to get the thing through it, would be grafting on bits that are just random bits of junk and stuff like that. But
Yeah, like the bicycle pump. You would just assume like,
yeah,
oh, the doctor did that
hmm
to get it to work.
yeah. Whereas I
I
didn't
love
really like when they took the same approach for the first Matt Smith console room, because it was basically saying let's do the same sort of thing again with grafting on bits. But the TARDIS is kind of just for some reason decided to do that. Um,
I love again that we're getting a little bit of a reference there, just because it's I'm interrupting there. I'm sorry, but it's just because
that's
it's
okay.
been on screen there. We're getting again a very iconic classic Doctor Who shot in Westminster Bridge, except this time it's been changed that it's the Doctor and his companion running across it instead of the Daleks,
Oh yeah,
gliding
true.
across it during the occupation.
And there's traffic now too.
Yeah, and it's very much your 2005 Westminster as well, because you got to get that big Millennium Wheel in there, and they use it brilliantly, framing his head in the shot.
This is again a sort of setting that they came back to a lot in the first Russell era, that sort of grimy factory like environment, which I really, really like. And it's maybe because this is, triggering a lot of nostalgia for that era of Doctor Who. But I'm thinking of like the Cyber Factory in series 2, the ship in 42 all has this sort of grimy, hot and, dirty industrial environment. I always think they're quite evocative. I really like that sort of setting.
I like it, but I like it confined to the RTD era, if that makes sense. I do like that when they discover at some point, obviously the economics of the thing tipped in favor of inside somehow working more cost effectively than going on location to these big factories and things, and suddenly you started getting ships, design interior built designs that complemented the new grading and everything that they were using in the sort of Matt Smith and Peter Capaldi era and stuff like that. But yeah, here it just organically fits so well with the way they were doing it, the way they had to do it, basically. And
This is
yeah,
also the first time we're getting, this like these flaming like red and orange and yellow colors that are so common in RTD's era. Whereas once we get into the Moffat era, like blue and green become more of the common motifs.
yeah. I like the warm palette. That's true.
I love this design for the consciousness as well. It does feel a bit more sort of accurate to the intention, because here you've got a great big vat of molten plastic rather than the tentacled horror from Spearhead that you see.
Mm-hmm.
But I do like that you can draw the connections between them as well. Like, this is the consciousness after it's been through the Time War. It does feel like it's been melted down and turned into this slag as a result of the war. So there, previously I would have been maybe, oh, the two don't really go together in my head, but they do now. It does feel quite a nice progression.
Mm-hmm. And that's again, that's a case of like don't scare Joe Public. Use the word anti-plastic. No technobabble, just anti-plastic. That'll do for now. And we'll ease you into the more scientific baffle gab stuff later on. But by the time I think they got to series 4 or something, the world had been converted into Doctor Who fans. So it was like, yeah, we can just throw all that stuff at you. But episode 1, anti-plastic. That's what you're getting. We're not going to scare you with anything more challenging than that. The first of many Jackie on the phone sequences to come.
The whole sequence in the Foundry is it's a little static for me. Like you can start to feel like it's really just Eccleston like struggling against these two extras in Auton suits for a long time.
Yeah, this must have been such a steep learning curve, though. Like it's a
Oh
short.
yeah.
Yeah,
I love as well that what Russell had said at the time, I remember, is like he wanted to take this big, iconic, classic Doctor Who moment that everyone knows, because like the dummies emerging from the shop windows in Spearhead is fairly iconic. He says, but we want to do it properly. Like, we're actually going to see them smash the windows this time,
yeah.
which is quite fun.
This sequence is just fantastic.
The look on Clive's face, that moment of, oh, yeah, I'm going to be dead in 2 seconds.
Yeah, it's come for me
does
now
it so
finally.
well. Yeah.
I've read the script for Rose. I have the 2005 script book there, which I was always disappointed they never did again. And I think the script direction here is something like that. So that shot where Clive's face just relaxes and he knows it's coming. It's the bit where the Autons gun cracks open, close up on Clive. He knows, and that's like, it's just really, really well done.
Hmm.
That's actually pretty brutal, and it's a really quick shot there, where it's just the Auton's gun firing in really quick succession 3 or 4 times there, and it feels brutal, like they're just firing indiscriminately into the crowd.
Well, and you've already communicated when Clive, got killed, that every time when that goes off, someone dies.
Yeah.
So,
And like they don't ever go gratuitous, like it's never seen. Like you don't actually see any bodies falling here. I don't even know if there's bodies on screen, like dead people, at any stage here. But there's just a general feel of carnage. But you can hear these gunshots, and you know what's happening, as you say. There's something pretty tragic in that bit of Jackie as well, being hunted down by the three brides. Given everything
oh
you find
yeah,
out later on with Pete. So that's actually a really nice wee touch there from Russell as well.
I love this thing too, where Rose refers to not having her A levels and so on before she has her big hero moment here, because it's a bit like it slightly echoes the Doctor's own thing of being uh, very very intuitively gifted but academically a disaster when he moves to the academy and stuff like that. And it's a case of what you do with what you have, and not necessarily the book smarts and all that. And Rose has that in spades. And she's got emotional intelligence and real actual intelligence, but she's just maybe not had those privileges in life of academia and doing well in school and stuff like that, which the Doctor can relate to very much. God, it must have been a logistical nightmare just trying to get the whole thing off the ground and filming all that.
I love that wee detail there, actually, of Rose turning down to see all this, carnage and adventure and happening, and she's grinning.
Oh, yeah.
That she feels, I suppose from her point of view, she feels she's found her calling.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I've forgotten how big the explosions in this thing were. It's really.
I do find it really creepy the way that, like there's one here, like the way they're still just slightly jerking. Like
Yeah.
it's just the fact that it's the leg. Like that's really creepy.
And the head's turned around the opposite way, so it just looks like his limbs are unnaturally bent the wrong way or something.
it's the way they're almost human. That's
Hmm. Mickey at his most cartoonish and useless here before he transforms into the hero later on. I think there was a story about a club or something next door to this being really really loud where they were trying to film, and then Russell T Davies or somebody having to go in and ask them to turn it down. Um, the late night revelers of Cardiff. Very green screeny looking at, isn't it?
I was going to say it's actually I actually think it's pretty impressive, and I love that from the word go there was no of none of the classic series restriction of you can't see the console room through the doors, because there's no reason why you shouldn't see it, especially when there's no interior door in this control room. So I love from the word go they're determined. Like, yes, there's the control room behind them.
Well,
There
I
was
sort of like it in the new series, but I will defend the little void, the little black void space, the little uh, vestibule area that there is in the classic, because you've got to account for those different looking doors, and also I think it's good if it's just not if it's not conspicuous to the average onlooker, which now it is. We have to assume something happened in the time where that just made him have to go like even more back to basics with that with that. So just, but yeah. So I like it in the new series, but I still prefer the little black interior for the old stories. It's more mysterious, and only a privileged few get to know what's in there.
This here is all great. This stuff here about the missed opportunity, and Rose, Rose regrets it immediately. Um, and it's the whole stuff about the time travel's not. I always felt that that was just coincidental. Like, I never put much stock by the whole it also traveled in time thing. It's she regrets it. He's come straight back. She's not going to miss this chance again.
Hmm.
and how often do you get a second chance like that to rethink a major decision?
That's so true.
I miss the next time titles like this. There was a beautiful art in the next time trailers.
Hmm.
This is all from the first 5 minutes of the episode too.
But it feels like this could be the entire episode, and then you find out
Yeah.
just how much actually goes on in it.
Oh, they'll have to get Zoe Wanamaker's voice in there. Like,
Awesome. And I love the end of the world. But that second episode was the one. This one was good, like really good, solid way to start it. And then it was episode two that I thought, yeah, this is really something. Like, I mean, I was fully on board anyway because it was Doctor Who, but I think episode two was like, wow, this is
Yeah,
really,
I was a little unsure after this episode. I mean, I loved the characters and everything. Just the style of it was just so much different that I was like, am I going to like this? Is this my
yeah,
really my kind of show? But then, yeah, End of the World just knocked it out of the park. That's a 10 out of 10 episode for me. I love it.
yeah. I'd give it 10 out of 10 as well. This is more like a good solid eight, but like almost intentionally so because it knows it has to tick certain boxes and it can't do everything. So
Right? Yeah, you've
yeah,
got. I mean, what did they have? 11 million people watching or something like
mm,
that. Yeah.
yeah,
I understand more now that it was big news at the time, especially in the UK, because it was, like, I suppose long enough had gone past in the general public's mind for it to be. Oh, do you remember that thing we used to watch and love, and it was a bit rubbish, but it was a bit brilliant at the same time, rather than the, you know. Like, you really do notice the production values decreasing as the classic series nears its end, and I don't feel that's uncharitable to say, because when you watch Survival, it's not exactly a big glossy production. There's very, very little. I don't think there's any studio bound stuff in it. It's all out on location, and they
no,
don't have to build any sets
Yeah,
for it.
but what about that cat?
yeah,
I love the cat. The cat's
I do. I do
cat's
too.
iconic.
what's
Um,
really sad though about that is that they're beginning to learn to make a virtue of that, and keep it very sort of like Rona Munro scripting something in like a rundown modern housing estate, with just a little bit of sci-fi stuff sketched in. It is how you handle that budget decrease, but they obviously tried to continue to be Doctor Who as was for a year or two, like 87 or whatever, which is like season 12. Anyway, I'm getting into a whole I'm going off on a whole sidebar here that I shouldn't, but yeah, just to see it back and just re-injected with enthusiasm and money and his writing, RTD's writing and vision for it was just extraordinary. Yeah, and it's still like as I was saying before we started there, like I still have moments even now, nearly 20 years on, where I'm kind of going, I still can't believe, like, this should be an alternate universe or something. But Doctor Who's actually back, and it's it's been a major success, and it's really loved, and like children, and I think Sarah Jane had her own spin-off. Like, it's like mad stuff. Like, if you really stop and think about what's happened.
I mean, we're going into season 14. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
we're more than halfway through the classic series, like, seasons at this point.
Hmm. And no real sign of, well, hopefully touch wood and everything, but no real sign of that, going away anytime soon.
Oh, it's at the moment it's getting a whole new lease of life, and it does feel quite good that we're revisiting Rose here. The first beginning, and we're getting, this we're doing it now, just on the verge of this new beginning for the series. Overall, what would you say is your impression of Rose as an episode then? And you can talk, I suppose, how you felt about it at the time and how you feel about watching it now. Greg, what do you think of Rose?
Well, I mentioned earlier, it was a little, it was hard. Hard to take as too intense, but it was a big shift. Even going into it, understanding that, of course, this is now 2005. They actually have money. Like, it's going to be shot like a modern drama. It's not going to be a 3 camera studio thing. That was all we had of Doctor Who, with the exception of the TV movie on TV. And so, to see this and to have it be so different from what came before was challenging. Like, for someone like me who had been raised on the classic series, it was like, what on earth? But at the same time, like, it's compelling. Like, it pulls you into it, and you've got just A-plus performances from your doctor and from your companion right off the bat. And I mean, and that right there will take any fan of the show and pull them in and hold on to them, or at least it should. Looking at it now, it's a very effective pilot. We've seen pilot episodes of shows are always a little ropey. They're always finding their feet a little bit, and this is no different. But again, like, by the end of these 45 minutes, you've very clearly defined, who Rose is. You haven't completely defined who the doctor is, but you've learned a lot about him. There's enough mystery to keep you intrigued. You've started to see their relationship growing. Like, it, with all the sci-fi trappings, like, the show is more character oriented now, and that really comes out in this episode, and it's a really compelling reason to stick around for episode 2, which, as I also said before, is just stellar. So yeah, I like it. It does exactly what it's supposed to do.
And what about you, Mark?
Um, without wanting to repeat a lot of what Greg said, because I just find myself nodding along in agreement with so much of that. I'll just say that this episode, it really does what it needed to do, right? And I still, when I watch it, there's still this thing I can't entirely lose, which is just this kind of, it's almost like I'm still back there, just like a tight knot of tension, going, please let it be good. And I can see it sort of taking its first stumbling steps, even though it is very confidently written. And those 2 leads are just excellent from the word go. There is still that thing in me of just like, until I get to the end of the world, I don't really get comfortable. And I remember. Do you remember that thing between Rose and the end of the world? It was the morning of the broadcast of episode 2 that the news had broken. Doctor Who quits. That was on the front of the newspapers. And I remember just going around and getting a few things in the shop and seeing those headlines and going, "Oh God, like, where are we now? Like, how's this going to go?" But by then, I think even by that point, or within days of it, there was confirmation that there was going to be a second series, that there was going to be a Christmas special, that the BBC was sort of dancing in delight over these ratings and everything. And I think that just gave me permission to sort of relax and go, look, even though Rose doesn't feel like this perfect thing, it's done a really, I'll always be fond of it. I'll never, it's not going to be one of my all-time favorite episodes or anything, but it had to do so much heavy lifting, and it does it so well. Like, it's even though it can look a little bit clunky in places, it's doing an amazing job, and it clearly worked. And mostly what I feel towards it is gratitude and admiration, not necessarily total enjoyment, but it's certainly enough enjoyment. And Eccleston and Piper in particular just get off the ground running, and you just can't help enjoy their company from the word go.
I think it's best viewed sort of in context of how it was, what it was intended for at the time. So by that I mean, it needs to be the perfect opener again for new viewers. So there's enough thrown in there, I think, for fans of the classic series to go, oh, I recognize that, or oh, that's aimed at me. So there's a lot of wee sort of very deft little references, and it effectively remakes Spearhead from space, in some form or another. Um, but the way it's structured and the way it's done, that we follow Rose through learning about the Doctor and learning, um, you know, who the Doctor is, what the Doctor does. It's all very much aimed overtly at someone who has never seen the show before, and I've always found it a bit difficult to rewatch because of that. Because you're sitting watching Rose, type into computer about doctors and blue boxes, and it's like we as viewers know what all of this means and what it's about. Um, but that's what it needed to be at the time, to draw in a new audience and to introduce it to people who had never seen it before, and to introduce it to people who had maybe forgotten, people who didn't read the Big Finish, or didn't read the Virgin New Adventures, or listen to Big Finish, or any of that sort of thing. But as I say, looking on it now, having with me having seen a lot of the classic series and done Big Finish and all that, there's enough wee references in there to make it quite cool to go, oh, this is Doctor Who, this is the same thing that I remember watching, which is quite good. I think Eccleston and Piper are fantastic from the off. Like Christopher Eccleston, we talk so often, or I talk so often about how brilliant he was. He was the perfect doctor for the time. Even more so, I think. I don't think. I think half the reason why the first few series work so well is that you do get this damaged Time War Doctor, and then you sort of get Rose coming in, and her influence on him sort of does brighten him up again, and does sort of temper his slightly darker side, which you get a bit more with Eccleston. And then you get the happy-go-lucky David Tennant Doctor, at least for a while. So I cannot fault them at all. They were the perfect people to regenerate the show. And Russell, there's nothing I can say about Russell T Davies as a showrunner and as a writer that hasn't been said before, because he is legendary, and rightly so. So yes, it's a great opener for the series. It's a great way to introduce new people to Doctor Who, because it's explicitly designed to be that way. But it does a lot of the heavy lifting of introducing and doing the first bigger on the inside thing, that by the time the end of the world comes around, you can just jump into this new adventure, and then you can go on and do it again with the Unquiet Dead, and it just keeps going then, that you're not having to do this setup, because it's already all been done with Rose, and it does leave the series in a place that it can go on and just run.
I'll tell you what, Russell T Davies will always have my eternal gratitude for is, I remember when they had that stop press announcement in Doctor Who magazine that it was coming back and everything, around the time of the breaking news on the radio, and so shortly after, whatever, it was within days. And he was quoted in this stop press article, I think, as saying, "Look, I'm still in the process of making decisions. I don't even know if it's going to be a continuation or a reboot." And the word reboot put chills through me, because I hate that. I thought, like, this, particularly Doctor Who, like, you just don't need to, like, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater here. And he didn't, and to be honest, I don't think he was ever going to be able to bring himself to do that truly anyway. But when it came back and it was a continuation, even though it was very softly seeded in at the beginning, I was so grateful for that. So yeah, and he looked after it in exactly the right. Oh, and the other thing I was worried about was he had done this thing in a series called Queer as Folk, where he had a character actually say Paul McGann doesn't count, right? and I didn't like that. I didn't like that he'd made a character say that, because I thought, well, maybe he thinks that, but just because he's a writer writing a character doesn't mean to say. And ultimately, it turns out, McGann's as canon as anyone else, as he always was. There was never any doubt about that. I know you'll agree wholeheartedly on that, Connor. But yeah, just it did give me pause for thought, and then but it's like, I think Russell T Davies is such a generous guy that even if he did momentarily think that and agree with that character, he said, "No, do you know what? The series is better with maximum inclusion and generosity, and everything belongs to it. It doesn't disown its past. Even if we just very gently, embark on this journey to start with, and we don't, we might have a Cyberman head in episode 6 or something, but we're just just got tread very lightly to begin with, and then, once we've got people in the palm of our hands, then we're going to start just being like, yeah, just full on continuity references and everything else. Not continuity references without purpose, but just the show sort of saying, I'm not ashamed of my past. It's part of me, Um, it's a vital part of me, So anyway, sorry, I'm rambling on a wee bit, but you get my broader point there. I just think he was the, well. Do you know what? The series just simply wouldn't be back without him, and thank goodness for everything he did and did right.
And also, don't overlook not just that he had to incorporate, or not incorporate, but had to respect 26 years of the classic series. Like, the fact that he was such a fan, and the fact that he was involved to some minor extent in the wilderness years. I mean, he wrote a new adventure, one of the best new adventures. Granted, you don't have any kind of references to that era, but at the same time, what does he do when he's looking for writers for the show? He goes and he gets Paul Cornell, and he goes and he gets Gareth Roberts, and he goes and he gets not from the New Adventures, but from Big Finish. Goes and gets Rob Sherman. Like, he's taking these very, very talented authors, and in some cases even having them use like old concepts from the spin-off material, and weaving it all together into this brilliant show. And I mean, it needed it's mind-boggling how lucky we are that Russell Davis exists, because to have someone who is that much of a fan of Doctor Who, and yet simultaneously that skilled of a television producer, able to put those things together and give us Doctor Who. Like, look, I
Yeah,
love Stephen Moffat. I love his era of Doctor Who. I don't know if Stephen Moffat could have successfully resurrected Doctor Who,
no,
but
I
Russell
don't
T
think so.
Davis did.
Yeah, he needed to be the first guy, and actually, just as you were talking about it, the person who came into my mind as sort of the antithesis of what you've just described is, and I don't mean this as a slight against the guy, because I think in all sorts of ways he's brilliant, but Mark Gatiss is so close. Like, he's such a fan that I think when he writes stuff, he's you can see that he's too close to it. He can't step away and do the things that Russell T Davis does in terms of what should and shouldn't be there. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of, he's too much of a traditionalist in a way, and RTD has the right balance of keeping the past and also putting some of those more radical, or yeah, getting all those voices into the choir, like Paul Cornell and people like that, and Matt Jones, and those people who really kind of made the show grow up with
Right.
um, the people who stayed with it in the wilderness years, but bring those voices in and obviously make it sort of attuned to a family audience in a way that it couldn't be. Obviously they couldn't do like a full on New Adventures type of thing, and it wouldn't have been the right thing to do. But yeah, that to juggle all those balls in the air, and have it come out just so, the equilibrium of it just come out so perfect. I still look back in amazement at how he did it.
I think it's good to have someone like Mark Gatiss in there, though, too, because I mean, even when he was writing New Adventures, like, he was always more on a traditionalist bent than
Mm.
some of the others. And I think that's a good voice to have. I mean, I agree. Like, his TV episodes don't really push the boat out at all, but they're solid, entertaining Doctor Who stories. So
Yeah,
I can't complain about that too much.
I do enjoy them, and I think he's an important voice to have in the mix. But I suppose what I mean is, if he'd been a showrunner, Um, I don't think it would have. I think it would have been maybe a what do you call it? A respectable attempt to get a modern audience to watch it again. But it would have been. It just wouldn't have. It would. I think there would have been failure to launch. Frankly.
Yeah, I don't think it would have worked either. I think
Yeah.
you're right
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, it's like there's a lot of stuff I pick up on more now, like through series one. It's stuff like I've already mentioned, and it's a testament to Russell that, as you say, he can walk the fine line between being the competent TV producer and being the Doctor Who nerd, and throwing in all these sort of deft little references that don't distract because they never ever. I just thought, oh, cool, that's an alien thing they've mentioned, and then it does sort of tie it back in a way. Like the ones that come to mind are in the long game. They mentioned Kronkburgers, and like Kronkburgers is first from a New Adventure. They were first mentioned in a New Adventures novel. Um, as far as I know, there's stuff like the lunar penal colony. Sorry, I cannot say the word colony for the life of me. But the lunar penal colony that the Doctor is sentenced to in the Parting of the Ways is or Bad Wolf is, as far as I know, the same one that the Third Doctor is sent to in Frontier in Space, and you actually see him in it. So that's, there's stuff like that gets thrown in there that people who have seen the classic series can go, oh, cool, that's a thing that I recognize, but doesn't distract from, it never distracted me as a new viewer. I think that's a very, very fine line to walk, and Russell has always treaded it marvelously. That's just an example of the sort of things you've been talking about there. So I think that's probably just about all we have time for, unless there's anything else that you would like to add.
No, I think that covers it pretty comprehensively.
Agreed. Yeah.
Comprehensive is the word there. So I'm sure we'll do more of these in future. I've really enjoyed doing that. Actually, I'm
Me
looking
too.
forward to doing it again. And thank you all very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed our commentary on Rose, and we'll be back for more spodcasting soon. I'll say thank you to Mark.
Thanks.
And thank you to Greg.
Always a pleasure.
And we'll be back for more spodcasting next week. Thank you and goodbye.